Well, hey, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well out there. BT, Ninth Amendment Party.com, Ninth Amendment Party, an unincorporated nonprofit association, as well as a 508 nonprofit religious organization as well. Hope everybody's doing well out there tonight. Tonight's topics are going to be interesting. We're going to be talking about God and government and just a little bit about myself and my family. So that way, those of you who are out there might have some questions. My family comes from northern New Mexico. We're American Indian. We come from an area mountain range called the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And in English, that means the Blood of Christ Mountains. We were raised in a very strong spiritual family, constitutional based as well. My family left the reservation in 1925, where it was legal or lawful, one would say, to be able to leave without being shot and killed due to the circumstances of that era. So, again, when I refer to the aspects of constitutional, my father was the very first American Indian elected as a sheriff in the state of New Mexico. And Paul Harvey said he was the very first constitutional sheriff in our country dealing with the federal government and usurping of constitutional rights, and most importantly, our unalienable rights that God bestowed upon us. And due to that, this is why I've been on this path for over 4 decades. Okay, so we teach a lot about the constitutional aspects, where we're at as a country, as a state, as a county, as a city. We've done a lot of work in other areas that are in other states. We were able to help Florida when we moved to Florida prior to moving here with the aspect of getting rid of the pride parades within the communities, showing more skin than what our children need to be able to see, so to speak. And so we helped them get through their federal case, which came back for the first part of it prior to the appeal, as they needed to be able to have those. And so we stuck with Jay and gave him the information to help the city there of Naples to be able to move forward. And through the appeal process, they were able to stop that. And so, we're looking at a lot of areas of change in our communities, within our structure of cities, within the ability to recognize who we are as God's children. And that's where we kind of look at things from the matter of tonight. We're going to be going over God and government. And one of the things that we have to take into consideration is our belief system. Okay. And there's two aspects of belief, and this is where some of you might have, understanding, and some of you might be new to this. But in our traditional areas, we look at faith as the strongest spiritual aspect within knowing God, because faith doesn't need to have explanation. It's something that's been given to you through discernment on a spiritual level to know who you are as a living man and woman, son and daughter created in God's image. And so when we look at the aspect of belief, belief is more of an educational based area where you've been taught about God, where you've been given information about Christ, where you've been given information about all aspects of life through that religious belief, through the parables, through the different forms of Bibles that are out there from the Old Testament to the New Testament. I mean, currently today there's thousands of different views of beliefs within thousands of different Bibles. And so we have to really break it down to really, where did Christ come? Where did God come? How was it brought to us within our structure of the living man, the living woman, our sons and daughters? And so when we look at government, we first have to look at really God, because God is the most important part of this journey, one would say, here on this form of earth. Let your belief be it's a sphere, or let your belief be it's flat. Okay, so the hierarchy of authority is very important. So when we look at the hierarchy of authority, God is the supreme ruler. God created man and delegated authority to man. That's under Genesis 1:28. Okay, so then now we look at it from the aspect of God created us. Where did man come into play? Well, man received the authority from God. Man creates government and grants government powers. Okay, Article 1. See the Declaration of Independence as well. Okay, so when we look at Article 1 in the Declaration of Independence, there are only certain areas of government that have the ability to be government. Okay, and so when we look at it, there's actually 17 areas. And when we break down those 17 areas, we can actually look at the area of government usurping exactly what they are not meant to do. Okay. And then the aspect of not meant to do is taking away our unalienable rights, what I like to refer to as unalienable rights. And so, what are those unalienable rights? Well, God bestowed each man and woman, son and daughter, the ability, first of all, of free will. And that's something that we have to take into consideration when we look at rights. Okay. Due to our choices, we have to have that ability to recognize within ourselves, as well as within others, their free choices. Now, it boils down to a very simple explanation. As long as a man, woman, son, or daughter does not cause harm to another individual, okay, then there is no crime committed, so to speak. Take that again. As long as a man, woman, son, or daughter creates no harm to another, there is no crime committed. And you can take that even further, okay? If a man, woman, son, or daughter is out there playing on the land and they're not destroying the land, then there's no crime being committed. Okay, these are things that we have to take into consideration as we move into the new areas of truth, as we move forward in this time of change. This is the decade of change, and words have so much power. When you look at things and you're speaking your words and your truth, you want to be able to speak them in a positive manner because, again, as soon as you tear down yourself or tear down others in words, then you're creating a frequency and a vibration that actually brings forth that. And the reason why is because we, again, are made in God's image. We are creators. We have the ability to recognize and to be able to change things through the spiritual and physical planes that we live in on this dimensional form of earth, so to speak. And so when we look at it from the aspect of government, government's changed dramatically since the conception of government. Okay. And when I say that, government pretty much was a area where men and women came together, looked at their communities, thought what was best for their communities, and initiated plans for those particular thoughts to make their communities better. And over time, governments changed. And when I say governments changed, many of you might not realize this, but even though we won, supposedly, the Revolutionary War, we really didn't. Great Britain has had a stronghold on the American country for the beginning of time, so to speak. Okay. They controlled us through economics. They've controlled us through all these areas of forcing other countries to cause havoc so, they could go ahead and utilize that to generate revenue and funds from the men and women through taxation here in our country. And there's many areas that are questionable is really, are we really a sovereign country? Okay. Up until 1913, okay, where the Federal Reserve came into effect, there were some changes being made from 1871 to 1913 where government no longer was of we the people. It actually became we the corporations. And within that aspect of corporations, men and women and sons and daughters no longer were the living being created by God. They were created into a fictitious entity by government. Okay. Now, there's many areas out there that people are aware of, and there's many areas people are unaware of. All these books behind me, anything that I have and will say, okay, had said and will say today, are in these books for evidence. Okay, the books to this side, where the green section is the definition of words used in every court case here in our country, and even further back into the aspect of European countries. When we look to the aspect of this area, the dark books there are the very first set of constitutional books that our Supreme Court of our country put together dealing with case law. And so when we look at the aspects of where we are in God and government, everything behind me proves exactly what we're going to be talking about tonight. And so when government created us as subjects, we were no longer sovereign beings as God intended. God gave us unalienable rights. And again, those are rights bestowed upon us because we are created in God's image. Now, through the Act of Congress in 1871, the 14th Amendment, Section 1, we became no longer sovereign within the aspect of the United States of America. We became subjects to the United States Incorporated, okay? A business. And so when you look at your birth certificate or you look at your driver's license and you look at aspects of this nature, you're going to see your name in all capital letters. And those all capital letters are very distinguished when it comes to definition. Definition under the Administrative Procedure Act in many states simply state that all letters of the English alphabet only include uppercase letters. There's no distinction between typeface or font that will be recognized, and this is the definition of a corporate name. So pull out your driver's license, pull out any contracts that you have, pull out any wills that attorneys have put together. You're going to see your name in all capital letters, and that's why. Now, when God created us, we were basically in the aspect created within a family dynamic, okay? And in our tradition as American Indian, our name would be given to us as a first name, and then our tribal name, Piwalata, would be our last name. And so I would be Balance Toe of the Piwalata family, okay? So in the biblical aspect, it's the same way. Years and years ago, people used to take their birth and write it in the Bible. That was the information that was held on to and sent abroad if anybody needed to know where you came from. Okay, so the Bible played a very important role in history, so to speak. And so as we look forward and we go into the area of statutes, ordinances, privileges, okay? Those are areas that are all subject to this commercial status that government created within you, the living man or woman. So I always tell people, are you a spiritual being created by God, okay? Or are you a physical being created by government? Presently, right now, that's how it exists. Every one of us is a spiritual being, but government has taken it to a point where they've taken the ability to create this entity into the physical aspect, which takes away our true spirituality of unalienable rights that God bestowed upon us. And so, as we move forward, we have to look at the aspect of free will. Where are we at within society today? Where is God at within our choices that we make? Where is government at? And how does government interfere with those particular areas? And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and open up a file here, okay? So just kind of stay with me here. And once I get everything situated, and there's a lot of things here that I have to open up. Okay, again, I'm a baby boomer, so just kind of stay with me here, okay? All right, here we go, and boom. So hopefully you guys can see this, okay? God and government, okay? So God and government, like I mentioned before, God created man and woman on his sons and daughters in his image. Government, we have a national government, which is actually a federal government today, the federal government. And when we look at the federal government, and if you look and define federal, okay, it's going to take you down a rabbit hole through three aspects. And it's going to come back basically that federal is a conspiracy to deprive you, the living man and woman, okay? And we have state government. And again, this is where that all cap name comes into effect through that federal government, through the state, as well as through the local government. Okay. Presently, our country is going back from a federal aspect to a national aspect. And so our responsibilities are going to be changed dramatically. And a lot of people are having difficulty understanding what's actually taking place as government is being changed. And when I say being changed, being returned back to what we refer to as a republic form of government. You see, democracy was never meant to be in our government of the United States of America. Democracy is an aspect of commercial servitude, again, leading back to Great Britain. And all this is going to be coming out here during this decade of change. And so by hearing this tonight, hopefully you'll be able to understand what we're going through as the administration that's presently is returning us back to a different form of government, our original style of government. Now, when we look at Independence Hall, we have to take the ability to recognize what transferred in that area. Well, our true independence, when it was written and signed as the Declaration of Independence, people were coming out of the hall. And Benjamin Franklin was sitting out there, and a lady came up to him and asked him, "What did you guys create?" And he said, "A republic form of government if you can keep it." See, so we did have at one point a true republic. Nowhere in our Constitution or the Declaration of Independence is the term democracy. And so those are the things that we have to take into recognition because, again, God created us in his image, and we created the republic form of government to maintain that unalienable rights. And so as we look at it from this standpoint, we have the ability to move in an area where sovereignty in the Old Testament describes God's absolute authority and power over creation, history, and nations, particularly highlighted in Daniel, Isaiah, Psalms, and Genesis. Key themes show God reigning over human affairs, appointing rulers, as well as controlling nature. Okay? So think about that. Controlling nature. Today, we have chemtrails that government has been putting up, and chemtrails are minerals and materials that they spray in our skies that fall down upon us, creating disease and areas of that nature, as well as killing nature, which is the pH in our ground. And so farmers throughout our country and overseas are going to have to be forced into using genetic modified seeds. And this is something that people are unaware of, and many people are waking up to this, okay? So as we move forward, we have province of jurisprudence determined. We have a duty to God and lower animals. We have a duty to self regarding. Now, let's kind of pause that just for a second. Duty to God and lower animals. In other words, we have a commitment, and is defined to God, to be in that area of true sovereignty, to have that ability to move forward without causing harm or injury to others. In that aspect of lower animals, then we have a duty to protect lower, these types of animals, our dogs or cats, things that we have within us that we bring into our family. Okay, it's a duty to maintain those things, taking good care of your cows if you're raising them for beef, things of this nature. We have a duty to self-regarding. In other words, the taking of responsibility to be able to move forward and the ability to recognize within ourselves how much responsibility we have to have in regards to going out and traveling in your automobile, showing up for work a little bit early, okay, uh, going and taking time for meditation and prayer, going to help the community, let it be through donations or time picking up trash that's been littered on our highways or our roads. Okay. We have the duty to protect our sovereignty, the sovereign country and state, county, and city. And so we have to be able to recognize, how do we do that? How do we protect that area of sovereignty that God's bestowed upon us? Okay, under Isaiah chapters 40, 46, emphasis God's power over creation and nations, featuring passages where God declares, I form light and create darkness. I am the Lord who does all things. Isaiah 45, 6 through 7. It portrays God as one who brings princesses to nothing. Isaiah 40, 23. Now let's break that down, okay? God's power over creation and nations. Think of what I'm saying. God has the ability to place those individuals into nations to follow the light and to step away from the darkness. Okay. We have to recognize that within ourselves, we both have light and shadow energy. The shadow energy is the negative energy that we have. That could be waking up one morning and just being not very nice to others. It could be not very nice to ourselves through guilt, shame, fear, things of this nature. Okay. When we look at Daniel, chapters 2 through 4, consider the key dramatic depiction of God's sovereignty. King Nubu learns the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men. Now, when he heard that, he was angered. Okay. Who is this individual that has more power than me? Okay. Government has gotten to the point where they feel they have more power than God. Think of what I'm saying. Government has the ability to do things to men, women, sons, and daughters that go against our unalienable rights only because they choose to. Okay. And it could be in your city, it could be a local sheriff, it could be a local policeman, it could be a county clerk, it could be the councilman of your community, all these things where they get so much authority that they usurp this authority and forget the will of the people. Look at some of the areas of data centers that people are, following and trying to prevent in their local communities. But yet you have councilmen, commissioners, cities, going behind the backs of the men and women of the communities and allowing these types of things to take place. Okay. Proverbs 16:1, 9, and 33 affirms that while man plans his way, the Lord directs his steps, even random outcomes, like casting dice, are so sovereignly directed. Now let's break that down. Okay. If we plan, which most of us, forget to do, okay, but as you get older and you get wiser, you plan things out. You lay things out in a manner where you know the positive as well as the negative steps that could occur as you are moving forward in a positive energy within your sovereignty that God has placed upon you. So, God will and has in my personal life placed roadblocks so that way I would be able to learn and generate a different outcome for my highest good. And I think God has done that for most everybody that looks at it from the standpoint of, why am I in this position? The old terminology of, you have to hit rock bottom before you move up is a very positive statement because again, a lot of times through our ego and through, you know, people that we hang out with and things of this nature, there's so much jealousy in the world, okay? Government is jealous of God. Think of that. Our country at one time had God in its heart. Today, the majority of non believers no longer have God. And these are some that we have to take into consideration as we move through this decade of change, because again, forgiveness is a very strong point of God. Okay. So as we look at Psalm 103 and 19, the Lord has established his throne in the heavens and his sovereignty rules over all. Okay. Well, if God created us, then our sovereignty also rules over all. We have to protect the sovereignty that each and every one of us has. The question is, how do we do this in a time where there is chaos and misunderstanding of government roles and things of this nature? As we look at Psalms 115:3, our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. Okay? Now, let's talk about heavens. If God is in the heavens, is heavens above us, below us, around us? In our traditional belief, we believe the heavenly structure is inside of us, okay? That we are the temple, we are the heavens within us, and that we have the ability to do as we please, because again, as long as we're not causing harm to anyone else or to the land, then we have that ability to move forward, to learn, to educate ourselves, to be able to help others in that aspect that God lives within us. Psalms 135:6, whenever the Lord pleases, he does in heaven and in earth. Okay? So let's look at it from the standpoint if the Lord lives within us and has directed us, we have the same ability to do that within ourselves on a spiritual level, as well on the physical level here on earth. Under Romans 8:28, we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Okay? It's really interesting when we look at it from the standpoint of have you been called? In my life, I was called in an early stage from around since the beginning, prior to me even being here. I can honestly say that. I really believe that. I believe that each and every one of us has a predestined area that God has created for us. So we have a purpose. Some of us come down and follow that predestined, and some of us don't, because again, we were given free will. Many people today who have done things that they don't feel comfortable about or have wronged others, things of this nature, where guilt comes in, fear comes in, ego comes in, all these areas that cause physical, mental chaos within our body, where the spirit lives and where our physical body lives. Okay. We have to have that ability to recognize that we have a purpose. We have to be able to have forgiveness of self before we can forgive others. Think of what that, how many times have you put yourself down? How many times has government put their thumb over you? Okay. Well, if you don't do what the government says, well, you're going to go to jail, even though there's not an injury to anybody. Well, if the government doesn't like you having a blue hat and they're going to fine you $500 for wearing it, where is the sovereignty that God has given us to be able to determine if we want to wear a blue hat, a red hat, a yellow hat, whatever the purpose may be? This is where we all have to work together for the common good. Presently, government in most states and within most areas within the cities, and even on a federal level, are not working together for the good of the people. When we look at Philippians 1:27 and 29, let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or I am absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, and not frightened in anything by your opponents. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of salvation, and that from God. But it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ, you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake. Now, this is a pretty heavy area here under this terminology, okay? You know, we have the Old Testament, we have the New Testament, we have all these different, forms of the biblical aspect of what was recorded. So let's just kind of break this section down a little bit. Let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ. Okay. Your manner of life is how you are reacting. Because again, remember, for every, action, there is a reaction. Okay. So if somebody's coming into your life and treating you mean, are you reacting to that, or are you being on a spiritual level in a positive form? Hey, what happened? Did you have a bad day? Is there something I can help you with? Instead of taking it personal. Okay. So that whether I come and see you or I am absent, in other words, God sees everything. Christ's energy, Christ consciousness surrounds each and every one of us. I may hear of you that you are standing firm in spirit. Okay. I refer to the spirit all the time. Anybody who knows me, I'm always, talking about the spirit. Because again, the spiritual identity of who we are is first and foremost the most important part of being in the flesh. Okay. BT, that's my name I go by. Okay. Balanced toe is what it means. When I was a young man, a young boy, my grandmothers gave me that name. The name balanced toe is to stay in balance within the spiritual identity that God created within us, that we maintain always, as well as the physical identity so we can move freely on this dimensional plane. Now, the sternum that each one of us have is the balance area. Just like if you took a pencil and put it on your finger that was standing straight out, you'd find that balance point, okay? That's the same within the spiritual energy and the physical energy that we both have. Everybody has this, okay? When we look at it from the aspect of striving side by side for faith, the physical aspect and the spiritual aspect have to work together. They have to be side by side. Okay. Once you find your identity within the spiritual aspect, within the physical aspect, you don't live in fear of government. Okay. You recognize the situations that are taking place, but you no longer live in fear. You find solutions. And within these solutions, they're normally given to you by spiritual conversations that you have with your God, with our God. There is only one God. Okay. Now, this is a clear sign to them of their destruction. Okay. Think of what I say there. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction. When we look at society today and we look at the woke movement, we look at Black Lives Matter, we look at Antifa, we look at all these areas, areas where some religious groups are going against the Christianity, some religious groups are going against America because they believe we are bad people. Okay. And they need to control us and take over us. Well, as we're moving through this decade and through this time, we're seeing that many countries now are changing their immigration, just like what we've done here in our country, to prevent the destruction. Okay. Now the destruction is upon them. Okay. Their salvation is upon them. Okay. But it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ, you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake. Suffer for his sake. Okay. And this is something that a lot of people will say, man, I'm just having a hard day today. You know, there's things that we see, things that we know. And there was a video here the other day that came on, and I'm just going to play it. It's a short one. Uh, just kind of bear with me. Hopefully you hear it well. And so it's called Words of Power.
You know what changed everything for me? When I finally understood that my words weren't just describing my reality, they were creating it. I spent 22 years as a 911 dispatcher. I heard people at their very worst moments speaking panic, fear, and desperation into existence. And you know what I noticed? The ones that spoke calmly, even in crisis, they seem to navigate it a lot better. Here's the thing. In the Gnostic text, especially in the Gospel of Thomas, Yeshua talks about the power of speech. He says, by your words, you will be justified, and by your words, you will be condemned. This ain't some mystical mumbo jumbo we're talking about here. It's quantum reality. Every word you speak carries a vibration. It carries an energy. And when you constantly say, I'm broke, I'm tired, or things like that, nothing ever works out for me. You're literally programming your consciousness to manifest more of that. The universe doesn't hear, I don't want to be broke. It just hears broke and says, okay, more broke coming right up. So here's what I started doing. Instead of saying I'm struggling with money, I say I'm building abundance. Instead of saying I'm exhausted, I say I'm recharging my energy. Same situation, completely different frequency. Now, the ancient mystery schools, they knew about this. Why do you think spells are called spells? Why do you think we spell words? Because words cast energy into the world. Try this. Try this for just 1 week. Catch yourself when you're about to speak something negative. Pause and reframe it. Instead of saying, this is impossible, try, this is challenging, but I'm finding solutions. Instead of saying, oh, I hate my job, try, I'm transitioning to something better. Instead of, I'm so unlucky, oh gosh, just bad luck everywhere, try, good things are coming my way. Because the kingdom of heaven is within you and it speaks through your words. You're not a victim of reality. You're the creator of it. Choose your words like you're writing the script of your life because you are. Drop a comment over here if you're ready to shift your language and watch your reality shift with it. I guarantee you it will.
So hopefully, those of you who were listening and truly opening up your heart and your mind, listening to those words being spoken just now, it's very important how we create because it's within us. Proverbs 29:2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people groan. So let's look at our government, okay? Let's just go back, let's say all the way back to George Washington time, you know, there was a lot of positive energy within the people. They were happy. Our country was self-sustained. One of our largest cash crops were used for making ropes and things of this nature. Okay, hemp. Okay, other areas we were able to create schools, move forward, help others within the aspect of timing. Let's fast forward. Let's go to 1900s. Okay, the government at that time was transitioning, taking away the rights of the people, taking away the currencies of our country, putting them into the hands of wicked rulers, the elite. Since that time, we've been struggling because each and every one of us are now sheeple within the aspect of no longer being men and women or the people. Corruption is seen as a sin against God, leading to the judgment on rulers who exploit the poor who are under God's protection. Now, when we look at exploit the poor, it got to a point where it exploit everybody. Doesn't matter if you're poor or if you're rich, you're being exploited by government. Think of it from the aspect of sovereignty. You've taken the time to work your life, buy yourself something, pay taxes upon it, and the government still wants taxes every year after you've already purchased it, as if they own it and you're just renting it. Look at it from the aspect of commercial automobiles, known as motor vehicles. The only motor vehicle, according to definition, is if it's used under commercial use. If you're in private and you're not transporting commercial goods, then you're not required, according to the law, to have certain privileges, a driver's license, registration. Okay. But the government doesn't accept their own laws. So you have sheriffs and you have policemen and you have county clerks and judges violating the laws that are already written because, again, they are exploiting everybody. And again, I can back anything and everything that we're saying tonight with the laws and show you if you request that. Okay? Courts of today working commercially violate God's unalienable rights that he's bestowed upon the living man, woman, sons, and daughters. Courts today are about generating revenue. Okay, doesn't matter if it's family court, which is really one of the most treacherous court systems in our country today, taking away the rights of the mother and the father and allowing the government to determine what is best for your son or your daughter. There are some states that even take it a little bit further and take away all the rights away from the man and woman, the father and the mother. Okay? Courts today have what is referred to as the court registry investment system. The court registry investment system is a system basically that pays the judges, the county clerks, if they know what they're doing. Okay, not everybody knows what they're doing, but the ones that do get paid off of every court case when they retire. It comes back into this fund, the court registry investment system. Look it up. Okay. And if you can't find it, I'd be very surprised because you can type that in on Google and it'll pop right up. And most of you have Google, I would think. Okay. Also, too, look at it from the standpoint of unalienable rights that we talked about earlier. If there's not an injured party, why is the state taking you to court claiming to be injured? I mean, nobody was in an accident, nobody got hurt, nobody had anything stolen from them. It's a statute of commercial activity which was forced upon you through your all capitalized name. When we look at it even further, we go to Deuteronomy 16, 18, 20. Commands that judges may not show partiality or take bribes. Well, through the court registry investment system, that's what they're doing. Because of such actions, they're blind the wise and overturn justice. In other words, the scales have tipped into the favor of the court system. Now, many of you might know, but some of you may not know, that every court, bonds are placed upon the defendants. Okay? Bonds are placed upon the plaintiffs. Okay? These bonds generate revenue behind the scenes through this case that is in the courts. Where does that money go? Who controls that money? Well, when we was in Florida and I met with the county clerk in one of the largest areas there as far as financial areas, Collier County, and I explained to her and I showed all the fraud that was going on, they could not believe that I knew what was taking place. And I went from being welcomed to being shunned because, again, the knowledge that God has bestowed upon each and every one of us through discernment is something that I've used my entire life. And so being raised in this family of knowledge from American Indian to constitutional to seeing corruption within the family that I exposed. All these things I personally have gone through. Many of you have gone through similar aspects within the courts, I would think. We have to take the time to not only educate ourselves, but to also educate those who are coming into new seats and new positions in this new election that is coming up. Okay? Who do we trust? How do we know that they're going to do the right thing? Now, when we look at churches, and this is something that's really interesting, okay? You know, we're kind of in the Bible Belt here. And we look at 501c3 churches and the hold government places upon them. Okay? These are the restrictions, okay? So, churches that qualify for 501c3 organizations enjoy tax exempt status under the Internal Revenue Code. This status provides several benefits, including exemption from federal income tax and the eligibility to receive tax-deductible contributions. Now, many churches are out there who utilize that strictly for the deductions and contributions, okay? The question that I always like to ask is, what is the church doing with the money that they receive? Do they put it back into the community, or is the pastor, like Joel Osteen, buying mansions and Lamborghinis and things of this nature, shutting his doors to the homeless people when a flood was happening? What are you doing as a pastor? What are you doing as a layperson within your religious community? Okay? Those are things that you should be asking. As a 501c3, these things are prohibited political activities. Churches are prohibited from engaging in political campaign or lobbying activities. This means they cannot support or oppose candidates for public office or engage in substantial lobbying efforts. The purpose of operation. Churches must operate exclusively for religious, educational, scientific, and charitable purposes. Activities that benefit private individuals or shareholders are not allowed. Compliance with the law. Churches must comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws. Engaging in illegal activities can lead to the revocation of their tax exempt status. Okay. In other words, the terminology that I look at is when two or more are gathered and they're speaking within that religious aspect, okay? Christ is present, God is present. And if you're speaking that individuals are violating your unalienable rights that God bestowed upon you, where is the crime? Where is the ability of the religious members to come together within their organization, their 501c3, and be able to declare these things? Why do they have a gag order? Why are they unable to help private individuals? Okay. These are things that we have to take a look at when we look at our churches and how they're based. One thing that people are unaware of is there's another way to be able to utilize the religious organization, and we'll touch base on that here shortly. While the Old Testament emphasizes that ultimate sovereignty belongs to God, but it also places a clear active responsibility on the people to protect their nation, families, and faith from external threats. Okay? Remember when we looked at our slides in the very beginning, a duty to God and lower animals, that particular slide, a duty to sovereignty, to protect ourselves, to help our families. In our traditional belief, there's three things that each man and woman have that nobody can take away. Number one, it's your faith. Okay? Your faith is the most important part of your spiritual and physical journey that even government can't take away. They can try. They might throw you in jail for it, but they can't take it away from you because it's who you are. It's your nature to know God lives within you. The second area, okay, is your family. And I always say this because again, I've gone through some hardship with my family, and I'm sure some of you have as well. And family, love them, hate them, they're still your family. But sometimes you have to release some of that energy, release your family, because again, sometimes family isn't a positive direction in your life. And that's a hard thing to do is when you sever those ties with family members for self-preservation. But that's where education comes in. Okay. Doesn't matter if you're book smart, street smart, got a PhD, dropped out of, junior high. It doesn't matter. If you know how to hammer a nail, nobody can say you don't know how to hammer a nail. If you know how to operate, you know, your bow and arrow, nobody can say you don't know how to do it. Might not be their way, but you still know how to do it. Nobody can take away what you learn through books, through personal experience, through teachers, through mentors, because again, it's your own personal education. And those are very important things because government can't take those from you. Okay. So when you're feeling blue, so to speak, just remember that you have your faith, you have your family. And again, family is not just blood, it's who you bring into your environment. Okay. Who do you come and bring into your environment and feel that they're a brother or a sister because you share the same faith, because you share the same ideology, because you know the truth versus the propaganda that like fake media and all these other areas are placing out in front of us. Okay. Another area. How many politicians, pastors, priests, laymen, and women continue to pretend to be righteous, while when nobody is looking are committing spiritual and physical wrongs against those they represent? When we look at Washington and we look at Congress and we look at the Senate and we look at things that have been brought forth as an example, the redistricting of the political areas within each state because it came down from the Supreme Court as unconstitutional. And you have individuals saying, well, we're going to go against that in the state and just continue doing that. Okay. They are not representing and not being righteous to what has already been predetermined. Jeremiah 7:11. The first calls out a den of robbers regarding those who steal murder, commit adultery, and then come to the temple to claim safety, highlighting hypocritical exploiting of sacred space. And there's a lot of religions out there, okay? And I'm sure there's a lot of churches out there where you've been in where you've seen this, okay? And you kind of wonder, what's going on here? You know, why did this individual come or then proclaim that they're, seeking forgiveness, but yet they continue to do the same thing? Kind of reminds me of the old mafia movies that see, Italian mafia, the Irish mafia, all those Russian mafias, Asian mafias, things of this nature, where they go out and they do all this terrible stuff, and then they're proclaiming to be religious. Okay, there's a lot of people in government today that are doing that. Okay, there's a lot of people in government today that have recognized their faults and have found God again and are moving forward within that area. Okay. We're not here to judge, but we are definitely here to observe and allow us to make the decisions of who we have that represent us. Okay. Isaiah 56:7. God describes his house of prayer for all nations, which was corrupted by the merchants and money changers, turned into a place of profit, preventing all nations from worshiping. You know, today in government, there's a lot of areas there that are not allowing us to worship. I mean, there's times where we have individuals who are in the media who come into a church to cause chaos, which has happened here recently as we look back. And if you're following the information that I'm sharing, you know what I'm talking about. There's all these things that are occurring to make the religious sector look bad. And we have to have strong faith to be able to move forward. We have to be able to turn away those merchants that are just trying to create money and not have a spiritual dynamic within them on church grounds, as well as anywhere else, the money changers, the tax people. Okay. Taxes was why our country was started to begin with. They wanted to place an additional tax on our tea. So we had the Boston Tea Party. These types of individuals were seen as exploiting the poor, charging excessive fees, and acting as traitors, which violated the spiritual justice mandated in the Old Testament. Okay? Take a time, look around your community within that aspect of elected officials, and make the right choices as things progress here in the next few months. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. Matthew 13:32. Some of you might have heard this. It takes time for a tiny mustard seed to grow into a huge tree, but it does so in God's perfect timing. Okay? Right now, this decade, in our traditional belief, as well as what has been happening in this decade, which confirms prophecy, we are returning back to a republic form of government. The sovereign movement was small and referred to as extremists, just like those who followed Christ in the early days. When I started teaching about a republic form of government versus democracy and the commercial status of government and the commercial status of the living man and woman from the late 70s to present day, we're talking 4 decades, I was called an extremist. I was thrown in jail because I was an extremist. Not that I hurt anybody, but because I was teaching. Think of that. Who else was thrown in jails and beat up? The disciples. Who was killed? Christ. Okay? To protect the individual unalienable rights God has bestowed upon us, we must become like the mustard seed. We must come together, unify, come together to one another, to be able to have that ability to recognize within ourselves what is going on and how we have to work together to create a community that can create a county, that can create a state, that can create a nation that is a true nation under God. The parable of the leaven. Christ told him still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough. Matthew 13:33. Like yeast working its way through the dough, the sovereign movement will flourish as it works its way through the spiritual discernment, the cultural blocks, by educating and traveling from individual to individual. You hear the term sovereign citizen all the time, and it's in a negative connotation. Because again, government, CIA, FBI, sheriff's departments, police departments, and it was all brought forth, a lot of it, by the sovereign area of deception. Okay. If they could go ahead and put fear because you wanted to be free, then they could control you. Then they could take away your spiritual identity. The church is under attack. You're under attack. Each and every one of our children are under attack. The community of sovereignty is under attack. God is under attack. Each one of us has to come into the knowing of truth. And accepting it is the hardest part of this physical journey back to God's spiritual purpose for each of us. Okay? What we teach, what we talk about, it's hard because our ego comes into play. And when our ego comes into play, a lot of things shut down. What's my neighbor going to think? What's so and so going to say? Is they're going to be gossiping about me now that I'm, seeing the truth? I'm sharing the truth. I'm living the truth. The parable of the treasure and the pearl. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy went and sold all that he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for refined pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. This is our spiritual purpose, okay? Heaven is within us. If we find it within us, we will hold on to it and nothing else will matter. When I was young, I had a lot of automobiles, a lot of antique cars, way too many. And Spirit told me I was out of control and to sell everything. So I did, except for 10 cars, and they ended up getting stolen. And Spirit said, if you would have listened, you would have had the money from them 10 cars. The parable that I got out of that was I didn't obey. Okay. Fast forward 10 years later, because I was on my spiritual path and living it strong, my dad and I were talking, and he said, "Hey, out of all those cars that were stolen, which did you miss the most?" And I told him it was this old international pickup. Well, spirit works in mysterious ways, as I'm sure each and every one of you would believe. A couple of weeks went by, and I got a call, and the state police said, "Hey, we found your pickup. Come pick it up. If you can go ahead and give us the identification number and this and that." And so I did, and I picked it up. It's rare that you ever get an antique car that's been stolen back. Talk to any car people. It's rare. Okay. But I had to give away everything that I had to find the pearl that was within myself. And that pearl was understanding what compassion was, understanding forgiveness, understanding the ability to take a responsibility of the teachings that my grandparents bestowed upon me to share that. All these things. And I'm sure each and every one of you have a similar story. When we look at the parable of the net, when it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore, then they sat down and collected the good fish in the baskets, and they threw away the bad. Okay? As sovereignty is spread throughout the world, and when I say sovereignty, every nation, every community, every man and woman who finds the sovereignty within themselves, it's going to attract all sorts of people. When I was started within this movement of sovereignty in the late 70s, I had people thinking I was crazy. Oh, BT, there's no evidence. And I'd show the evidence. Oh, well, that's just in one book. I'd show them the government's books. They still couldn't believe it. Some are willing to take it seriously, okay? And others who are merely drawn to the elements of the message. There's a lot of people that are like, yeah, I want to be part of this sovereign movement, but I don't want to do anything to get there. I just want to hear the message. God did not intend us to just hear the message. God intended us to take his message of being sovereign, created in his image, to others, to the community, to the state, to the nation, to other countries. But a time is coming when real believers will be separated from the false ones, in the same way that the fishermen would separate the edible from inedible fish. There's a time where people are going to get off their butt, so to speak, get out of their chair, and they're going to take action. And those who take action will receive all the benefits of that action. Those who don't are going to be looking at others who are getting ahead in life, and they're going to wonder why. Because as we go through this decade of change, there will be a separation of two governments, the corporate democracy and the republic form of government. And it's already occurring in some states around our nation. It just hasn't occurred completely. And maybe come July 4th of this year, maybe we'll hear it will be completely done. Time will tell. The parable of the homeowner. He said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of the house who brings out his storeroom new treasures as well as old. Matthew 13:52. Are you able to pull the treasures out of the old belief system? Okay. Corporate democracy has a few good things in it. Okay. There are some things that are in it. Okay. For instance, if you're a corporation and you're working in a commercial structure, then you should have the ability to be taxed accordingly or tariffed accordingly. If you're not in the commercial structure and you're just a living man and woman working to make ends meet, then you shouldn't be taxed. Okay? That's kind of how I look at it. And maybe we won't even have taxes come the end of this decade. That's my belief. Tariffs that have been implemented, that were challenged by the Democrats and the Rhino Republicans and the people in the communities and these groups that are being paid by George Soros and the elite, the Rockefellers, and all these other individuals who don't want to see us free. They want us to maintain slavery to Great Britain and the complete control of that technology. Okay. Because many of you don't recognize the new treasures being brought forth, you couldn't completely value or understand all the treasures that are available as a sovereign nation, man or woman. As we move forward in this decade, there's going to be many treasures being brought forth. Are you going to recognize the treasures and take hold and take the ability to implement things so you can receive these treasures? These treasures are going to be given to each and every living man and woman, son and daughter within this golden age that we are coming into. The government that we know today is changing, and it's changing in a manner that every government around the world is changing with it. And the leader of this change is the current administration. He might, to some people, look at him as a sinner, but the disciples were all sinners. I think each and every one of us can say we've sinned. The question is, have we returned back to the spiritual path and our destiny that God created for us while living within that Christ consciousness? The parable of the wandering sheep. In the same way, your Father is in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish. He's referring to the children, okay? God is always watching over us and brings accountability to those who abuse children. There's millions of children that have been lost. I grew up in a time and was abducted myself at an early age. And when we look at what transpired during that time frame, we used to refer to it as the milk carton kids. They put a picture of the kid who was abducted on a milk carton, and it was out in the grocery store. Today, we have abuse of children in many forms. Let it be trafficking, sex trafficking, let it be creating this transgender movement within the kids who haven't even have the knowledge of who they are, but they're hearing this and they're being forced that within our education systems, within our communities, within, dual parents, I mean, when we look at this and we look at this map here on the right, all the green is saying no, no to this. All the blue is saying yes. God is not happy with the blue. Are you happy with what you see? Are you able to do something about it? Are you able to go to your community libraries and make sure that there's no transgender books being placed in there for your kids to look at and to hear or to read? The terminology in some of these books is outrageous. They're in our school systems, which are outrageous. Maybe some of you might know people who live in Washington, Oregon, Nevada, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Kansas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all these areas, Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, Maine, Virginia, Alaska, Hawaii. These are all, for the most part, Democratic ran states. Do you think God is happy? The parable of the unmerciful servant. But when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. Matthew 18:28. That's kind of what government is right now. Okay. What happened to the government serving we the people? Instead, they have become the tyrants pretending to be good. Give me your money, your hard earned money. I mean, there's people now today who are elderly, okay, who are on a fixed income where property tax they can't afford anymore, and they're having to sell the land that's been in their family for generations or lose it to higher property tax. When we was in Florida and I met with these groups of patriots and I brought up the property tax issue and I showed them the fraud, especially dealing with the Homestead Act. Because the Homestead Act puts the individuals who signed it into a commercial status. Yeah, you're getting a little bit of a tax break, but if you own your home outright, you shouldn't be able to be forced to pay taxes because you're not using it commercially. Now, if you're, running a business out of your home, then that section of your business would be taxed commercially, but not your entire piece of property. And technically, if you own it outright and you're living on the private structure, none of it should be taxed. And I met with educators, and boy, they were mad because it was a union state when it came to educators. And they're like, BT, this is ridiculous. You'll never see Florida do away with taxes on property. Well, after teaching some of these groups how to get your elected officials to recognize the truth, Florida is in the process of doing away with all property taxes, as I presently am teaching tonight. Every state has more money than you can even imagine. But the money that I'm talking about isn't dollars, okay? They're debt notes. It's credit and debit. Ever since 1933, when the Security Act came into effect and they took away all the gold from the men and women of the country to reestablish a positive money flow after the 1929 Depression, every birth certificate had a bond placed upon it, generating revenue. The baby boomers are worth millions and millions and millions. And when I say millions, I'm talking 100 million plus. The next generation, because again, debit credit, they're worth a lot of money too, but it's in a different structure. Okay. And the reason it's in a different structure is because after 1971, we were taking off the gold and silver standard. So it became truly fully credit debit. all debt. Okay. And as this decade moves forward, you're going to see all debt forgiven. That's something that I know is going to take place because the money that has been stolen from the American people by government is not what God intended. And there will be a jubilee, and we will see it this decade. The parable of the workers in the vineyard. So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Matthew 20:16. We, the people of the United States of America, will be first again due to the implementation of critical executive orders and the upcoming changes in the global currency. Decoding the mechanics of the quantum financial system. Right now, we have two economic systems running side by side. We have the fiat currency system, which is Swiss based, and then we have the quantum financial system. And the quantum financial system is all asset backed currency. In other words, no longer a fiat currency that has no backing other than it's just a promise of a note to be paid because it's debit credit based off of the oil, okay? Where the quantum financial system will be based off of actual assets, gold, silver, land, trees, whatever asset a country has, it'll be based off of. It'll be a digital ledger. It'll be asset-backed currency, as I mentioned, advanced security protocols. In other words, no more back channeling government money to give back to Democrats or rhino Republicans or fraudulent, areas like we're seeing in Minnesota and some of these other states, that are being taken advantage of through Somalians and through other, organizations and ethnic groups that come here knowing how to go ahead and get this money. Okay. There's going to be a different form of contracts. There's going to be an area where all of these systems are going to be brought forth. And so there's going to be a global transparency where we're not going to see money being used for illicit use. This is all taking place in this decade. It could happen tomorrow, people. It's already in system. There's over 207 banks that are now part of the 207 countries, okay, that are what they refer to as Basel compliance. In other words, they have to have assets to back the money that they're lending. They no longer can use your money as an asset to lend money. Another thing that's going to be happening is medbed technology released to the public. All the pharmaceutical stuff that's been going on, all these areas of change that, we've lost people, we've had many people that I'm aware of that I know in our communities, due to fertilizers and all these other things that were utilized, died due to cancer, things of this nature, all these aspects, people who have lost their limbs, things of this nature. All this stuff is going to be switched and changed out. And all this technology comes from reversed engineering of unidentified flying objects from other areas of space. It's kind of interesting because Trump just went ahead here recently, and he says, hey, we're going to release all the UFO files. Well, they have to release that information because if they release that information, this technology that I'm talking about will be understood. It'll be available. It's been available for a lot of years to a select group. Presently, there's some in New Mexico. New Mexico is one of the strategic areas dealing with UFO technology. So think of our future. Think of the things that we have to do. Think of the things that are happening. The Ninth Amendment Party.com has a lot of information dealing with oaths of office of the sheriff, the clerk, people in government. Talks about things that is evidence. In other words, you can look at it, type it in on your Google there or whatever browser you utilize and find it and verify it. The hardship that most people have is they listen to a lot of people, but they don't verify. All the documentation and everything that I have, you can verify. And if you can't verify it, it's not because you can't, it's because you're not looking in the right area. And if you need help looking in that right area, feel free to contact me. When you go to the Ninth Amendment Party.com, there's a contact page. Just fill out your name, information, email address, and we don't sell your information, just so you know. Send me your question. You can also go to the Ninth Amendment Party on Facebook. If you're not a member of it yet, join us. Stay in tune to what is going to be changing. It's the best time to be alive, people. And again, thanks for joining us on our Zoom class tonight. BT signing out, Ninth Amendment Party.com.